The Reverend Maurice Dometz was born in Blue Rapids, Kansas on June 24th of 1896. After graduating high school, Maurice briefly attended Hastings College up in Nebraska, but dropped out just months before his final examinations in favor of studying at Omaha's Presbyterian Theological Seminary. He then attained a master's degree in theology from the University of Denver before continuing his academic study at the city's Rockmont College. From 1923 to 1943, Maurice earned a living as the associate editor of the Christian monthly magazine, Grace and Truth, and it was during this period that he met his wife-to-be, Myrtle. They were married on June 1st of 1930, settled in Longmont, Colorado, and soon welcomed a daughter named Martha Ann into the world. Throughout his life, Maurice continued work as the editor of various Christian magazines, to which he often contributed, as well as serving as the Longmont Chamber of Commerce, the Denver Bible College Board of Trustees, and the Rockmont College Alumni Association. Maurice also had many passions in life, but perhaps the most eccentric of them all was his passion for what he referred to as his beloved rocks. It was an affectionate nickname, as in truth Maurice possessed a fascination for rare minerals and gemstones. He was a keen member and avid contributor to the American Federation of Mineral Societies, while holding a senior position at the Flatirons Gem and Mineral Club, and throughout his life he regularly engaged in one of his favorite hobbies, mineral hunting. Even in his advanced years, Maurice would enlist the help of a more mobile friend, then drive out into the woods to hunt for rare quartz or hematite. And that's exactly what he was doing on April 29th of 1981, when he and a man named David McSherry traveled to the Topaz Point picnic area near Devil's Head, Colorado. Topaz Point, named for the high quantities of the eponymous mineral present in the surrounding rock formations, is located in Colorado's Pike National Forest. Stretching west of Colorado Springs, the forest encompasses over 1 million acres and is spread out over several of the surrounding counties. Splitting the forest in two is a 45-mile-long unpaved tract named Rampart Range Road, which has magnificent views of Pikes Peak, the surrounding prairie, and the rugged Tarial Mountains. The forest is popular with campers and mountain bikers and boasts Colorado's only functioning fire lookout tower, which sits atop of Devil's Head. On the day in question, Maurice was wearing a white baseball cap, a maroon plaid flannel shirt, and brown ankle-high work boots. Once they had found a suitable parking spot, David helped the 84-year-old Maurice to reach their digging spot, a small sandy pit not far from the Rampart Range Road. He and David had spent a short while digging through the sandpit before Maurice suggested his much more mobile companion begin another trench around 50 to 60 yards away. A few hours went by with each man burrowing away at their respective dig sites. Then, around 3 p.m., David walked over to Maurice's trench to let him know that it was time to drive home. He agreed. Then, when David returned from his dig site after collecting his tools, Maurice was gone. Since the Reverend's own tools were nowhere to be seen, David assumed that he'd simply packed them away, then walked uphill to meet him at their car. There were no signs of a struggle at Maurice's dig site, meaning David had no reason to be alarmed. But when he too trudged up the hill and his car became visible at the crest, the Reverend Dometz was nowhere to be seen. David honked his horn a few times, hoping it would summon the elderly Reverend to their vehicle, yet he remained out of sight and failed to respond to any of David's cries. David then walked in circles around the place that they were parked, hoping his elderly companion might be taking a pre-ride pee against a tree trunk, but became increasingly panicked when Maurice was nowhere to be found. It wasn't so much the man's absence which frightened David. Despite his age, Maurice was a fit and capable individual, and wasn't imperiled by simply being outdoors. What frightened him was that Maurice had seemed to suddenly and quite inexplicably disappear. And by 11 p.m. that night, the Douglas County Sheriff's Department had its dedicated search and rescue team on the scene, who conducted preliminary oversight searches before daylight could aid their primary effort. In total, just shy of 100 people descended on the area surrounding Topaz Point to lend a hand in the search. Human chains made up of volunteers walked slowly through the trees, eyes glued to the earth, while teams of dedicated tracker dogs ran roughshod through the hills, trying in vain to locate any kind of scent trail. Many involved expressed incredible frustration at their inability to locate any trace of their missing person. At the very minimum, the tracker dogs should have at least given them an idea of which direction Maurice went, yet they only ever seemed to alert at the trench that he'd been digging at. It was almost as if he and his digging equipment had simply vanished into thin air. Despite their failure to achieve any meaningful progress, the search continued for around 2 to 3 weeks before it was finally discontinued. Maurice's wife, Myrtle Domitz, expressed tearful indignation at the decision and accused the Colorado governor of abandoning her husband. In an open letter, she publicly begged him for help and insisted the case was much more sinister than that of a regular missing person. Many believed Myrtle's claims were nothing but manifestations of her inconsolable grief, but others, volunteer searchers included, voiced their agreement. Many claimed that in their experience, Maurice's disappearance had to involve some kind of foul play. The fact that the tracker dogs were unable to pick up his scent suggested that Maurice had been transported out of the area by vehicle and quite possibly against his will. Nothing else could explain why the tracker dogs couldn't find a trail. Nothing natural, anyway. Finally, in the year 1990, the Reverend Maurice Domitz was officially declared deceased in absentia by a Colorado Supreme Court judge after being missing for a total of 9 years. Relatives petitioned the judge to have Maurice's death declared unlawful, which would have in turn forced police to reopen the investigation into his disappearance. But since there were no signs of any struggle at the Topaz Point dig sites, and since there had been no blood or cries or help suggesting some kind of attack of abduction, the judge refused the family's request and refused a verdict of unlawful death in favor of one by misadventure. Since then, a number of prevailing theories have emerged, each of which attempt to explain Maurice Domitz's sudden and rather chilling disappearance. The first, and perhaps the most feasible, is that Maurice suffered severe complications due to the blood disorder he'd been suffering from for many years. Others say he could have quite possibly taken his own life, having considered it a less painful, less drawn-out alternative to dying in a hospice bed. It would have been just like Maurice, they say affectionately, to want to spend his final day digging for those beloved rocks of his, rather than face a time when he'd be unable to do so. Yet to the contrary, Domitz was a lifelong man of God, who tried to weave the Bible's teachings into every one of his conscious acts. Therefore, it seems highly unlikely that he'd opt to take his own life over a natural, God-given end to his life. On the more ridiculous end of the theory scale, some have suggested that David McSherry murdered his friend Maurice in order to secure a huge stash of topaz for himself. But the man has been questioned extensively and has never once been considered a legitimate suspect. And so, what else might explain a man's sudden and rather chilling disappearance? Did David McSherry murder his elderly companion out of malice, or did he assist in the voluntary end of a sick man's life? Or perhaps, something far more sinister, but far less explainable, is to blame.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. My name is Angela Parker. I'm a final year journalism student, and our class is supposed to go make a documentary film in the nearby jungle. The teacher divided us into 5 teams, and each one of us had to come up with an excellent and unique idea. We would be assigned marks based on the final version of our films. Each team was to explore different parts of the jungle and choose a topic for their film. 2 teachers for each team were also assigned for our teams, who were supposed to overlook our projects and for our safety. Jonathan, Carlos, Grace, Sammy, Martha, Kevin, Mr. Joan, and Mr. Andrew were on my team, and we were assigned the south area for our documentary film. We were supposed to spend 7 days here to collect the materials, and after we finished filming, another 2 days would be given to us for editing and finishing up the final versions of our documentaries. The topic we chose was the decreasing wildlife. It was about the animals who were dying and the number of wild animals decreasing by the cutting of forests by humans, and about the animals that are leaving their habitats. I know looking at the topic we had chosen, the time we were given was very less, but we were determined to win the top marks for this documentary. Anyway, our team set off for the destination a day prior as others did as well. It was because reaching the forest would also take up a day of our time, and so we were granted permission to leave early. Everyone had brought whatever materials were needed for the documentary, and the trip included food, tents, water, and other things as well. We reached it after a long 9 hours of driving, which was exhausting in itself. As we entered the jungle, it felt unusually hot and dry in there. Maybe I felt it because of the sudden change in my surrounding and atmosphere. So we went ahead and set up tents to rest for a few hours before starting our work. "Don't you feel a weird, unusual stir among small animals?" Kevin said in a worried tone. "Where did you even spot small animals? Even I did not see one yet," Carlos asked in a sarcastic tone, which made the rest of them laugh, except for me, because Kevin was right. I saw on my way that the birds were acting strange. "I think we should head back," Sammy suggested. "And why would we do that?" Martha asked in a rude tone. "I think Sammy is right. The weather and the way animals are reacting. Something is wrong here." As I said that, the rest of them turned and looked at the teachers, hoping they would say something. The 2 teachers looked at us in confusion for a few moments, and then Mr. Andrew said, "No one is going anywhere, and we will be proceeding with the documentary film first thing in the morning." "Yes, kids, Mr. Andrew is right. So go on and eat your dinner and go to sleep, because from tomorrow, you might not get it," Mr. Joan added and walked to his tent. "Bullshit, let's just go, team," Jonathan, who was the leader of our team, said, walked away. I knew that he was also sensing the danger looking at the surrounding, but we had no other choice but to follow the order teachers gave us. After having dinner, we went to our tents, and everyone prepared to sleep. That was when we heard Mr. Andrew scream, who went to pee 10 minutes ago. Everyone rushed in the direction of screams, only to find him get torn apart limb from limb by 2 tigers, who seemed like they were fighting over him, thinking of him as food. We did not dare to go anywhere near them to try and save Mr. Andrew, so we ran to our tent. That is when we heard more tigers approaching us, so we changed our direction to the car and immediately got in and locked the doors. "Where's Martha?" I noticed her missing, so I asked worryingly. "I don't know, maybe she's in the other car." As Sammy said, a tiger jumped on the front of our car and started to attack it. It looked like he was set on destroying the car and taking us out. And then 2 more tigers appeared. "At this rate, they're going to break their way into the car." Carlos's voice was trembling while saying this. At the same moment, we heard Martha scream coming from the direction where our tents were. I suppose she was trying to hide there when we ran toward the car. "We gotta do something," I said in a weak voice. "What are we supposed to do? These tigers are surrounding us." It was Sammy, and she was right. We did not have a chance to think of saving anyone other than ourselves. The tigers stopped attacking the car, and they started to walk in circles around us. After half an hour or so, they stopped and sat near the car and kept looking in our direction. "Let's just start the car and get out of this place," Carlos whispered to us. "But none of us know how to drive a car, and even if we did, our stuff is back in our tents. We can't just leave without them," Sammy replied. "What is more important to you, your stuff or your life?" Carlos said in frustration. "Carlos is right. Sam, we gotta get out of here somehow. But Carlos, Sam is also right. None of us know how to drive. I looked at him and said this in a concerned voice. About that, I know how to drive. I just said I didn't because I did not want to drive for 10 hours all the way here, Carlos said while trying to hide his gaze from us. We all agreed to his plan, and then he started the car. From the voice of the engine starting, the Tigers got up, and as they charged towards us, Carlos drove the car away from them. I turned my head to see if others were safe, and saw the other car also followed behind as Tigers chased them as well. After about 15 or 20 minutes, they stopped chasing us, and we managed to get out of the jungle within an hour or so. When we were sure that we were out of danger, we stopped the car and waited for Jonathan's car. They were 10 minutes behind us, and the moment they caught up, we noticed that there were only 3 people in the car: Jonathan, Mr. Joan, and Grace. "Where's Kevin?" Sammy asked with a trembling voice when she did not see her boyfriend. "I'm sorry, Sam, but we couldn't risk our lives with Kevin," Mr. Jones said. Sammy broke down and started bawling her eyes out, while Grace explained that he tried to sneak to the tents when the Tigers were calm, but they drove off, leaving him the moment they heard Tigers getting up again. We drove back to the town, and no one spoke a word the entire way back. The only sounds were of the wind and the sniffling Sammy. After another 10 hours, and we entered the town border, Carlos dropped each one of us off to our houses, and then left for his own. The next day in college, we were called to the director's office, who informed us that we were not the only ones who faced that situation. 2 students from another team had returned with similar news. A few days later, we got the news that a fire had broken out in the jungle, and fire departments were trying to put it out. I guess since the other animals went in hiding or ran away, the Tigers must have been hungry, and that must be the reason they attacked us. What was even more surprising to me was that while we were trying to save our lives, Jonathan managed to record the entire attack and submitted the film for our documentary. I don't know why, but this made me feel sick and horrified, but changed the name of the topic to Predators.
I feel like I should preface this by making it clear that I'm not one of these paranormal-obsessed, ghost-hunting loons that think there's orbs in all their photos. And when I tell you that one of my favorite TV shows is Penn and Teller's BS, where they debunk all those nonsense conspiracy theories and whatnot, I think you get an idea of what kind of person I am. And for years, I went around thinking that science and logic could account for everything, with the only restrictions being the limits of our own knowledge. That was until something happened to me that I genuinely can't explain, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't come up with any legitimate explanation. The whole thing freaked me out so much that it kicked off a kind of hyperfixation in me that lasted for months on end, to the point that my rational skeptic friends started to think that I was losing my mind. But I haven't lost my mind. It actually happened, and as much as people try to tell me that it was nothing but my mind playing tricks on me, I know what I saw, and it just about put the fear of God into me. We're going back to early spring of 2017 here, the time of the year when it's still getting dark fairly early here in the Northeast. It's around 9 p.m. and I'm driving back to Narragansett from my buddy's place in Newport, when I decide to take a shortcut through Saunderston. It's a drive I'd done like 100 times by that point. I felt like I could do it with my eyes closed at a push. But maybe that's what made me so complacent, a self-assured cockiness that's gotten me into trouble on more than one occasion, because about halfway into the journey, I must have switched off and taken a wrong turn. Next thing I know, I'm having to turn into a residential cul-de-sac to make a complete 180, and I'm so embarrassingly lost that I find myself reaching for my phone to check Google Maps. I check my position, mentally make a note of the turns I have to make to get back onto the highway, then start turning off the street as I put my phone away. When bam, there's a car in front of me. I slam on the brakes, let out a string of curse words, and prepare myself for, at the very best, a few scolding honks of their horn. I then start mouthing apologies at the driver, taking my hands off the wheel and being like, "Dude, I'm so sorry. My fault. My bad." When I noticed something really unusual about the car they're driving. It was a legit classic car. And don't go thinking 70s Camaro or something. This thing was a Buick, like one from the 30s or 40s or something. The kind of car you'd expect to see Al Capone climbing out of in Prohibition-era Chicago. And it was crisp, too. The guy must have sunk some serious cash into that thing because pretty much everything looked brand new. I suddenly realized that while I'm checking this guy's old car out, I'm actually still blocking him in. So I start backing up after giving him a nice car kind of thumbs up after pointing to his hood. The guy doesn't react though, at all. The whole time he's just smiling at me through his windshield. And as I start backing up to let him pass, I remember how he almost looked like one of those old ventriloquist dummies. Something about his hair or how waxy and pale he seemed to just trigger the association. Then, right as I'm about to give him enough space, my car just shuts off. The engine, the battery, everything. I jiggle the keys around, kind of frantically by that point, because I figured I'm making a total idiot of myself in front of the dude with the cool vintage car, but nothing happens. Lights won't turn on, engine won't fire, and my first thought is, God, of all the times for my battery to die, why now? My car was a piece of garbage back then, making it disappointing, but not a total surprise. But I'm still blocking in Buick guy, who's surely getting mightily angry after sitting there for a solid few minutes. So I roll my window down, lean out a little, and start yelling over to the guy's car that he has to go around. But he doesn't respond. And all I can hear is this creepy old music coming from his car. I can't see a thing of him because of high headlights. He's not saying a thing, and that freaking song is making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Now this is the part that really freaks me out to recall. As the situation with the guy is turning into something of a standoff, I'm sitting there in the driver's seat wondering why the guy isn't talking, moving, or doing much of anything for that matter. I don't want to honk at the guy. Everything had basically been amicable so far, so I'm just sort of sitting there, waiting, getting more and more anxious as I do so. That's when the lights on my dash start flickering a little, and I think my battery might be coming back on. I don't know much about cars, but I'll take it. So I get all excited thinking I'm going to be getting away from what had been an incredibly awkward situation. I start jiggling my keys in the ignition again, but again, nothing happens. Right until my car radio bursts into life and starts playing the exact same creepy song as the one playing in the other car. It didn't have any lyrics. It was this creepy tritone loop with something playing over it. But somehow it managed to fill me with this feeling of dread as I realized something seriously weird was going on. The whole time I'm basically being blinded by the Buick's headlights while it just sits there. Then suddenly, the thing's headlights cut out. Right at the same time my radio does, and I'm plunged into darkness again with my natural night vision having been totally ruined for a few seconds. While I'm half blinded, I try the ignition once again, and I breathe a huge sigh of relief when my car comes back to life again. But that little moment was severely short-lived because, as my own headlights turn on, the old Buick is nowhere to be seen. It came as such a shock that I actually screamed out loud, spinning around in my seat like I might catch a glimpse of it driving away. But no, there's absolutely no sign of that Buick anywhere. It was like it had just straight up vanished into thin air. You think with a big old engine like that, I'd have heard it driving past me even if I was distracted by other things. And the time between the headlights cutting out and me getting my car running again couldn't be anything over 30 seconds. It would have had to zoom past me to disappear from my view so quickly. Have you ever felt super stoned and you don't even smoke? That's what it felt like. I'm putting the entire thing on myself, trying to explain it away as like a mini stroke or something, and it even occurred to me that my buddy back in Newport might have dosed me with something groovy, so to speak. But no, sober as a judge the whole time. And you can bet I didn't drink anything because those Rhode Island state troopers just love hunting DUIs. So like I said, because I couldn't find any way to explain what happened, it kicked off something of a hyperfixation in me. I revisited the cul-de-sac where it happened, looked up potential classic car owners in the Narragansett area, and researched medical papers on blackouts and time loss. The latter had me convinced that I was suffering from syncopal attacks, basically when your heart doesn't pump enough oxygen to the brain, a pretty serious condition, so, as you can imagine, I was only too willing to pony up for a medical checkup. Doctor listens to my heartbeat and checks my blood pressure, then, without any further examination, declares there's nothing wrong with my heart. He did say that the blackouts can be caused by stress, but at the time, I wasn't particularly stressed about anything, so I ruled that out as an explanation. One point, I went far out and ended up researching those UFO encounters where people experience time loss, but I figured I'd gone far too down a weird rabbit hole with that one. But as for the thing that people really pick up on with my story for some reason, is the fact that I did actually have a bit of luck when it came to my classic car search. There was a guy out in Middleton who had been trying to sell a 1937 Buick Special for years. The thing was a wreck, but he figured it might catch the eye of some vintage car enthusiasts who'd find the time to fix the old beauty up. I played it off like I was interested in making a purchase and still feel guilty about how excited he got, and he got his nephew to text me over some pictures of the old thing so I could take a good look at it. I'm not saying it was the same model or shape as the one I saw in that cul-de-sac, but I'm not gonna lie, it looked pretty similar. But it's an absolute impossibility that it's the same car, right? A coincidence, if ever there was one. Yet some of the people I talk to about this will always point out the connection and tell me I should have asked where he'd gotten it, if the old thing had been involved in a murder or a hit and run. Truth is, the guy didn't know. He said his dad picked it up at a police auction and died before he could get a chance to fix it up, and obviously, anything he knew about the car was buried with him. I suppose I've rambled on enough about this now, and I've already made my point that I can't explain what happened to me that night without sounding like a complete fruitcake. So, I guess I'll just do what I always do, and leave it up to you guys to decide what it was. But please, don't tell me ghost car or whatever, because I've been hearing that nonsense for like 4 years now and I'm sick to death of hearing it. And besides, hypothetically I did believe in ghosts. I think it would mess me up pretty bad to think that I got so close to one, but still drove away, unscathed.
When I was around 15, I lived alone in a 2-story house. Although there were bedrooms upstairs, I would sleep on the living room couch. This was for 2 reasons. One, it was the central location of the house, so I could hear everything too. It was equidistant from every exit. One night, at around 2 in the morning, I heard someone juggling the front doorknob. It was slow, cautious jiggle, like they were trying not to be heard. When the door didn't open, they didn't stop. The jiggling slowly became less cautious and more irritated. They persisted for at least 2 minutes. We went to the back door, which was also locked. If I didn't want to call the police, because I was an unemancipated minor living alone. I didn't want to be placed into foster care, and I didn't want my parents in trouble for neglect. Eventually, the jiggling stopped. I stayed up that night waiting for them to try other entrances, but nothing happened. A few nights passed, and I awoke to the sound of the door opening upstairs. The doors in the house would really stick, so they took a lot of force to open. When he popped them loose, they'd make a loud scrape pop and shutter noise. At the time, I would take sleeping pills, It made it really hard to fully awaken, and I'd sometimes only awaken with sleep paralysis. I couldn't determine whether I dreamt the sound or whether I woken up from it. I started to fall back asleep and thought I heard the door close like grinding of wood rubbing together. Then the sound of bed springs screeching like weights were being shifted. I thought, maybe someone is homeless and they thought this was an abandoned house. I was super tired and wasn't sure if I was actually conscious. I fell back asleep and awoke to the feeling of somebody watching me. There were stairs parallel to the living room door, and I could see them from the couch. Halfway down the stairwell, I could see a long-haired man, crouched over, looking at me. It was dark, and I felt like we were both trying to verify what we were seeing. I kept a metal baseball bat by the couch and grabbed it. Slowly, the man erected his body and without turning backed up the stairs. I just listened for him to leave or waited for him to come back down. But I heard neither. It was like he just stood at the top of the stairs waiting for me. I didn't go back to sleep. I heard nothing, even until sunrise. When I left for school that morning, that questioned what I'd actually experienced. I had my boyfriend over later that evening. As we approached the house, he said, "Hey, your windows are open." I looked in the room to the sticking door was wide open. I told him what I'd experienced the night before, and he helped me check out the house. After finding nothing, I enclosed and locked the windows. I figured it must have been a hobo. Once they realized somebody lived there, they left. I still stayed there that night, but I didn't take sleeping pills. I woke to the door opening again. This time, I knew it was real. They knew somebody lived there, but they still returned. At this time of my life, I had little value for my life. I had no fear of death because I knew where I'd go. I decided that I wasn't going to hide in my own house. I got my baseball bat, turned on the lights, and went upstairs. I yelled something like, "Listen, buddy, I'm coming up. Be out by the time I get there." I heard nothing and prepared for the worst. I checked the rooms and the closets, but I found nothing, and the windows were still open. I checked the downstairs and found nothing as well. I felt pretty silly after finding nothing, but still stayed out that night. I got ready for school the next morning and saw that the window was open again. It occurred to me that I hadn't checked under the beds when I'd done the search. I didn't have my bat with me and bailed. To think that intruder was possibly hiding under the bed as I searched the house is spooky, but I'm partially relieved that I hadn't checked. If I'd been down and come face to face with the man beneath my bed, the story may have ended differently.